I'll welcome to the podium the Minister of Education and Childcare, Demetrios Nicolaides.
Thank you, Garrett. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me today to hear about an important update on school library materials and subsequent policy. Several weeks ago, I announced that we would be taking action to put consistent, province-wide standards in place to help guide our school boards in the selection and management of school library collections. This was prompted by concerns that have been raised to me about highly graphic sexual content that had been found on school library shelves, which my staff later verified to be true. Those materials have been shared with the media and were available for Albertans to see for themselves in our news release and in our public survey on the issue. The results of our survey, of course, were published recently on June 20th. Today I'm here to announce that we have created a balanced province-wide standard to ensure school library materials are age-appropriate and free of sexually explicit content. I am confident that these new standards strike the right balance of supporting the important role school boards, librarians, teachers, and staff play in selecting school library materials while setting clear expectations as it relates to sexual content. This is an important step because, and I can't stress this enough, until now, Alberta schools had zero standards for selecting age-appropriate books for libraries. Today, I will walk you through the standards, and then I'll be happy to take your questions. The new standards are set out in a new ministerial order, which is now published on the Government of Alberta website. Under the new standards, school libraries are not permitted to include material containing explicit sexual content. Non-explicit sexual content may be accessed to students in grades 10 and above, provided it is age appropriate. These terms are defined in the ministerial order. School boards must also regularly review their school library collections, publish a full list of all available materials, and ensure that a staff member supervises student access to school library materials. School boards will have to remove any material with explicit sexual content from their library shelves by October 1st, 2025. All school boards must have publicly available policies that align with the new standards for selecting and managing materials by January 1st, 2026. School boards can either create new policies or update existing policies to meet these new requirements. The school board policies must outline how school library materials are selected and reviewed, how staff will supervise student access throughout the day, and how a student, parent, school board employee, or other member of the school community can request a review or removal of materials in a school library. School boards are also required to clearly communicate these policies to employees, students, and parents. Since many school boards already have policies in place, I am confident they will be able to meet these timelines, which have been developed in consultation with school boards. These new standards will apply to public, separate, francophone, charter, and independent schools. These standards will not apply to the 55 municipal public libraries located in school buildings or to learning and teaching resources selected for use by teachers to support curriculum. In May, our government conducted public opinion polling of 1,500 Albertans on the topic of sexually explicit materials in school libraries. 51% said such materials should not be permitted in any public library in the province that is accessible to children. From May 26 to June 6, almost 80,000 people completed our online survey to provide feedback on the creation of consistent standards to ensure the age appropriateness of materials available to students in school libraries. Parents of school-age children were the largest group of survey respondents, making up almost half of the total number of responses. Out of the nearly 40,000 parents who took the survey, 41% said children should never have access to sexually explicit content in school libraries. 22% said that sexually explicit content should only be available in grades 10 and up. The highest proportion of respondents, 23%, said school librarians should decide which materials are age appropriate, followed by 19% who said it should be parents. We recognize there are diverse viewpoints on this issue, and we appreciate every Albertan who took time to share their views. With the policy we are introducing, I firmly believe we have an approach that strikes the right balance. We believe that students should be curious, inquisitive, and exploratory about their world without encountering sexually explicit content in school libraries. The standards we've created provide clear, consistent guidance on appropriate sexual content for school libraries while keeping school boards, librarians, and teachers in charge of selecting and managing library materials. This policy gives clear direction for school boards, teachers, and school staff and provides greater assurances to parents about the kinds of material available to children in school libraries. This is never and was never about banning books or specific authors. This was never about erasing particular narratives from school libraries. This is simply about ensuring young students are not exposed to content depicting oral sex, child molestation, or other very inappropriate content. We thank all Albertans who have taken part in our surveys and helped to inform this policy. We look forward to working with our education partners to implement the new standards and help make sure that school libraries remain places of wonder, discovery, and learning for students. It's now my privilege to invite Blaine Badiak to the podium to share a few words. Thank you very much. Thanks so much. Thanks for being here.
Good afternoon. Sorry. This is the first time at this podium. Thank you, Minister, for inviting me here to speak on this important policy, one that puts a focus where it belongs, on ensuring kids can be kids. I understand that this can be a charged topic, and as a member of the LGBTQ community, I want to be crystal clear about what this policy is and what this policy is not. This policy is about ensuring children are not exposed to inappropriate sexual content. It is not about erasing LGBTQ stories, and it is not about banning books that have LGBTQ themes. It has absolutely nothing to do with that. This is a balanced policy which ensures that children are not exposed to the images that we all saw when the minister first announced that he would be addressing this issue. Just as a reminder, those images included depictions of oral sex, child molestation, and other material that is widely inappropriate for young students. LGBTQ youth deserve to see themselves reflected in stories that affirm their identities and experiences. To suggest that such representation must include sexual content is not only false, it's a disservice to the LGBTQ community. It sends the wrong message. For a teenager who may be questioning their gender identity or sexual orientation, representation matters, but it must be age appropriate. Non-sexual, identity-affirming stories are critical for helping them understand who they are without confusion, pressure, or exposure to content that they are not ready for. In fact, limiting LGBTQ representation only to stories with explicit content does real harm. It reinforces the harmful stereotype that our identities are inherently sexual, which we know is not true. It hurts the community way more than it helps. Calling this policy anti-LGBTQ distracts from the real needs of these youth. Many LGBTQ adults support policies like this because we remember what it was like to be young, vulnerable, and confused. We wanted guidance, safety, and support, not adult content we were not ready to process. We want LGBT youth to grow into confident, healthy adults. That starts with allowing them to be kids first, free from adult decisions and adult material until they are ready. In closing, let's elevate this conversation because our kids are watching. They need to see adults who can talk about difficult issues with respect and compassion. That's not for that why we're here, to put children first. and that includes LGBTQ youth who deserve stories that are loving, caring, supportive, and appropriate for their age and stage of life. Thank you. I would now like to invite Nicole up to the podium.
Good afternoon. As the board chair of Red Deer Public School Division, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak today about the new provincial standards for school library materials introduced by Alberta Education. These standards come at a time when many families, education partners, and stakeholders are asking important questions. Questions about what children are exposed to and what role schools should play in shaping not just academic learning, but safe and respectful environments. We all want students to be challenged, to engage with new ideas, to learn how to think critically, independently, and with empathy. But we also want to know that the content and resources that they access, especially in school, are appropriate for their age and stage of development. That's the balance that these new standards are meant to support. This isn't about banning books or silencing voices. It's about recognizing that some content simply isn't appropriate in a K-12 setting. And we already apply this principle in other areas of school life. Take substances like alcohol and tobacco, for example. Some students in our schools may be of the provincial age to consume them, but that doesn't mean that we put them in our vending machines. Why? Because they don't belong in a school environment, regardless of age and legality. Explicit sexual content should be viewed the same way. It may exist in society, but that doesn't mean it belongs in our classrooms or libraries. And we must be mindful of this. If a passage or image isn't appropriate for the front page of a newspaper or a billboard on the side of the highway, then it shouldn't be available to students in K-12 learning environments. These new standards set clear expectations, and they give school boards across Alberta the tools to make thoughtful, transparent decisions about library materials. This is about accountability. It's about open communication with the families and communities we serve. And most of all, it's about creating learning spaces that keep students' well-being at the center. I want to thank Minister Nicolaides and Alberta Education for taking the time to listen and engage with families, educators, and school boards across the province. Nearly 80,000 Albertans took part in that conversation, and these standards reflect the need for consistency, transparency, and care. Red Deer Public Schools welcomes the new provincial standards for school library materials. Our division is committed to maintaining welcoming, respectful learning spaces where students can grow and thrive. Under the new standards for school libraries, we remain dedicated to providing learning resources that reflect our values and support student success. We support this direction, and we're proud to be part of a system that continues to listen, adapt, and put students first. Thank you.
All right, folks, we'll go over to the Q&A. As always, one question, one follow-up. The media mic is over there, as everyone seems to know. Please let us know who you're with, what your outlet was, and who your question is for. So I'll go to the first at the mic. Please go ahead.
Adam McVicker with Global News. Minister, thanks for taking my question. You said this isn't about banning books or erasing narratives. That's not the intended result of this. But what if that becomes an unintended result of this move here?
Well, the government of Alberta does not have the authority to direct a school board to remove any kind of particular book. So we don't have the ability to do that. We can't do that. As we've outlined today, we do have to have standards in place regarding what's appropriate for what age of audience, and that's what we're doing here today.
And what repercussions are there, if any, if school boards maybe do not comply with this, or if some of this content is found on shelves after the deadlines you guys have imposed? Sure.
We haven't outlined any specific consequences or repercussions in the ministerial order. I don't have any reason to believe that any of our school boards or our partners would not be in full compliance with the standards that have been set out today. If for whatever reason there are significant deviations from the policy, then we'll have to explore next steps. But I don't really have any reason to believe that our school boards wouldn't be in compliance.
Next reporter at the mic, please.
Matt Case, Canadian Press. Thanks for taking questions today. Minister, your Chief of Staff, James Johnson, met with a group called Action for Canada on November 2nd, November 15th. They had been lobbying for the removal of books from schools, including for the books your government flagged in May that seemed to trigger this policy. So why did the province wait 6 months when you were aware that these books were on shelves in Alberta schools?
Well, I think it's important, of course, to be diligent in whatever work you do. I think it's important that we make sure that we verify any kind of information. You know, a lot of individuals approach me and approach the ministry with different concerns and objectives, and we have to look objectively at what's being asked. We have to make sure that we're conducting necessary analysis and exploring, you know, as I mentioned, we had to explore to see, well, you know, what kind of authority is there currently within the Education Act? Would we need to develop a new ministerial order to address some of this? Would we need a new piece of legislation? So it's just about being diligent in terms of understanding what kind of additional next steps can be taken.
Sure. There's legislation you can do, but why wouldn't you just pick up the phone and call the public school boards and talk to them directly?
Well, I think that this was obviously, I think the main issue here was a larger conversation about province-wide standards. So, you know, looking at this, of course, there's a realization that we don't have provincial-wide standards when it comes to selection of material in schools. So that becomes a bigger conversation, and there are larger policy implications as a result. So have to think about, well, how does that work and how does that operate in different schools? Thinking as well of schools where it's a K-12 environment or a K-9 environment. So there's lots of considerations that need to be employed. This isn't about just again, finding specific titles and removing them from shelves. It's about making sure that we have a consistent province-wide approach that is sensible and reasonable to make sure that children are not exposed to inappropriate content.
Thank you.
Next reporter at the mic.
Caden Brayshaw, Livewire Calgary. A bit similar to another question asked here, but both the Edmonton Public School Board and Calgary Board of Education said that they were unaware and surprised of the investigation, of your investigation when you first announced your plans back in May. Why was surprising them with the news, the route you took? And with this new announcement, have you made them aware of these new guidelines?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's my practice to always provide our school boards and other partners with notice before any kind of announcement like this is made. So that was done when we first announced our intent to develop new standards, and that was done just now, about maybe an hour and a half ago upstairs. I had a roundtable conversation. I think there was about maybe 160 attendees on the call, where I was able to walk them through what the announcement was that I was about to make and give them an opportunity to ask questions.
Yeah, thank you. And then I actually have a question for Blaine, if you wouldn't mind. Blaine, thank you. What was your reaction when the minister announced his plans back in May, and what has been your involvement in making these new guidelines?
Just like every Albertan, I had the opportunity to answer the survey, which I did. I was not involved in the direct creation of the ministerial order. When the images were shown, I was utterly shocked. I mean, no kid needs to see that, especially, you know, I think in my future, as a future mom, I definitely don't want my kids to ever see that stuff. And the fact that it was readily available to kids as young, you know, K-9 schools, that's just not appropriate. So I thought it was really important that this policy come forward, and I was very disappointed that some people chose to label this as a witch hunt against the LGBTQ, and it just simply is the opposite. It's really about protecting every student, and I think LGBT students need that support as well, and that's what they didn't do this. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Next reporter at the mic, please.
Tyson Fedor with CTV, and Minister, this one, these two are for you, I guess. I guess maybe how do you envision the next several months going for a lot of school boards to get back into those libraries, go through almost every individual book to try to pull some of these books off the shelves? Since the 4 that you brought out in May, have you heard or seen of any more books like that need to be pulled from shelves? And how do you envision the next several months going for a lot of these school boards with not extra funding coming as well?
Yeah, I understand. Obviously, there'll be some significant work involved. I know that many of our school divisions, of course, have already extensive catalogs and have an understanding of the content. And, you know, I think they should be able to pinpoint, you know, areas to take a closer look at. And there's, of course, age recommendations for some books, and I think, you know, that can give them some direction. it'll take some time for sure to review the material, and we had originally planned for September 1st implementation date. Our school boards, of course, raised a very valid objection, which was that they just won't have the time and ability. Everyone's adjourned for summer and gone for the summer. So that was very reasonable. So in the new ministerial order, we have that date set as October 1st. And we're happy to work together. If we need more time, we'll provide more time. This is about getting it right, so we'll do what's necessary.
And kind of a follow-up to Adam's question as well, just in regards to consequences, I should say. If it does come to that, let's say one school board says, you know what, we're not going to follow this. Does it come back to you with the levers that you potentially have to potentially look at pulling funding and saying, until you get in order with this new standard, you're not going to receive any funding?
Yeah, I would have to take a closer look at that. I haven't been in the scenario at all yet in the past two plus years as minister, where a school board has openly stated that they do not intend to follow through with a new government piece of legislation or policy. So I'm not too sure what actual levers or instruments would be available to the government and the minister in a situation where a board is deliberately non-compliant. So if that situation arose, I would have to explore what to do in that scenario.
We will go to the lines. Operator, first caller, please.
George Lee from Fort Macleod Gazette. Your line is open.
Hi there. Thanks, Minister. And thank you, everybody else there. I'm just wondering, first of all, I'd like to just go back to that October 1st deadline again, and maybe get Nicole's perspective on that, on what that's going to mean for Red Deer.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so very much. As the minister stated, there was consultation and conversations with Alberta school boards, and that was a concern that was raised. The initial date was specified for September 1st. Multiple school board chairs stated that that was not enough time. As the minister stated, it is coming back in from summer, and that has been extended to October 1st. Also, the minister has stated if school boards find that it is not enough time, the ministry is willing to work with school boards to do what's right for students to get these materials ultimately right within our schools.
Follow up, George?
Oh, okay, so what I'm hearing is at this point you think it's doable with both the resources that you have and with the knowledge you have of the school public library collections. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I think that the majority of resources in schools are already well categorized and cataloged, so this should not be a difficult process. Timely, maybe, but it should be relatively straightforward.
Operator, next caller.
Erin Collins from CBC National News. Your line is open.
Hey, thanks very much for taking my question. So I'm just curious, as I read the exceptions to the application of this ministerial order, if the objective here is to get this sexually explicit content out of schools and to create a standard, a provincially created standard for this, it seems to me that teachers individually are still free to use any of this material. Am I reading that right? So any of the material that you have deemed sexually explicit, I'm reading your words, whether there's masturbation onto another person or, explicit description of penetration, that's all fine if a teacher decides to use that book in a learning or resource setting.
A teacher always has the discretion to select particular books and materials for novel studies and things of that nature, so that won't change under these new rules.
Okay, so it just seems like it kind of not doing all that much if it's allowed. Just second question, I guess. Who's going to decide what's sexually explicit? Because I know the sexually explicit and non-sexually explicit, it does feel in some ways quite specific, but in other ways not. So I was asked a question today about whether or not the passage, if love be rough with you, be rough with love, prick love for pricking, and you beat love down, from Romeo and Juliet, would that be sexually explicit? Would that be non-sexually explicit? Like, could a grade 9 student read Romeo and Juliet? And who's going to decide this?
Yeah, of course, it's up to the school boards to implement the standards, we do have comprehensive definitions in the ministerial order. When we had our engagement and consultations with the Alberta school boards, one of the things that was impressed upon me was the need to have really robust and clear definitions, because undoubtedly there's some gray area, but if we can provide clear definitions to reduce or limit that gray area, it can provide clear direction to librarians and teachers and others, and that's what we aim to do. If there's any questions, if there's any concerns, we're always happy to chat with school boards or librarians to give them advice and guidance. But I think with many of these things, we have to look at the spirit. And I think the spirit here, again, is to make sure that really explicit and graphic sexual content is not made available to minor children. So what you just described, in terms of Romeo and Juliet, I wouldn't categorize that as being sexually explicit. A graphic depiction of oral sex, on the other hand, of course, certainly is.
Next caller, operator.
Tyler Dawson from National Post. Your line is open.
Hey, thanks for taking my question. First one's for the minister. I'm just wondering if you've personally read the 4 books that kicked this whole thing off.
I have not. I'm struggling to find the time to read a quarter of any book, let alone 4 books, but I haven't had the opportunity, no.
Next question.
Okay. And second question. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. And second question was, what mechanisms are in place to sort of protect students' freedom to read? As in, I think we can imagine a scenario in which you have people making lots of complaints and stuff, and libraries are, preemptively pulling books off shelves in order to avoid having to go through a time-consuming and labor-intensive process to appease some activists or parents. So how do you protect students' freedom to read and their freedom of speech and all that fun stuff here?
Sure. Well, they have the freedom to explore any subject, topic, or book that's available in their school library, that's available on the internet, that's available in public libraries, or any other forum or venue. Books depicting graphic sexual acts, however, should not be available in school libraries.
Next caller, operator.
Tamar Durrani from Globe and Mail. Your line is open.
Hi, Minister. Thank you so much for taking our questions today. Minister, I understand that the focus today is on restricting sexually explicit content from school libraries. But can you explain then why it's important to also prohibit books that are non-explicit sexual content as it's being defined? From what we're being told, students in grade 9 and below will not be allowed any material that contains the depiction of bodies with references to puberty, menstruation, breastfeeding, or romantic relationships, including hand-holding and kissing. So I'm trying to figure out what that is doing here today.
The objective, again, is to make sure that any kind of presentation of sexual material is done in an age-appropriate way. That's the entire focus of the policy that we're developing. That's the entire focus of the ministerial order here. And we, again, want to make sure that students have an opportunity to, of course, explore these topics, but we want to make sure that that's done in an age-appropriate way.
Follow up?
Yeah, okay, I understand. It's just the age appropriateness. I mean, at grade 9, these are topics that kids are talking about, right? So when they read a book, that's something they're going to want to know about. I guess as a follow-up, Minister, you've said today that the ministerial order, again, is not about banning books. Even some of the other speakers are saying this. And, even if we call it prohibiting or restricting or disallowing books, one of the things people watching nationally are worried about is that there is no list of definitive books provided, right? Like we've been given those 4 books before, which you're saying you haven't read. And then, of course, there's others apparently that are also part of this, leaving room for evolving interpretation of these guidelines. Can you please explain why a list of books has not been provided today beyond those 4 mentioned before? And again, authors for which take issue with their novels being called sexually explicit or age inappropriate.
Well, just on the last point, I know the author of the one book, I believe the title was Gender Queer, stated that she believes her material should not be available to children. I'm not sure about the authors of other books. I guess there's varied opinion and perspective on that. I don't have the authority within the Education Act to direct a school board to remove a particular book. I don't have that power. I don't have that authority. I don't believe it's necessary to make any kind of legislative changes to give the minister that kind of power and authority. But I do believe it is necessary and appropriate to provide guidelines. And to be honest with you, I'm surprised that we even need to provide these kind of guidelines. I thought that it was, generally understood that we try to protect children from certain types of images. We have ratings on movies, given the nature of violence and sexual content that's displayed in movies. This already exists in so many different aspects of our society. I'm really surprised, to be honest, that I need to draft a ministerial order to say that you can't have books on your shelves with graphic sexual content for minor children.
Operator, next caller.
Janet French from CBC Edmonton. Your line is open.
Hi there, Minister. I wondered if you could explain why religious texts are excluded from scrutiny here, and if you can clarify for us, because we were not able to get an answer to this in the technical briefing, what is a religious text? What qualifies under that category?
I think we would have a broad understanding of religious texts, of course. The key texts of our major religions. Of course, religion can be something that is more widely interpreted. So if there's any concern with that interpretation, be happy to explore that. There's always opportunities to make amendments and modifications to the ministerial order. Our general view and perspective, however, though, is, of course, religious texts are important components of preserving an individual's freedom of religion. So we want to ensure that that material is not being limited as a key component of someone's religion, faith, and practice.
Follow up?
Yes, please. Violence, weapons, things like other things that could be objected to by parents or guardians, those are not included in this ministerial standard. It's just sexually explicit material, those related topics. Why kind of zero in on that subject rather than other things that could be inappropriate for kids?
Well, I think there's a wide range, of course, of and different opinions about what is inappropriate and what is not appropriate when it comes to violence, when it comes to, we could have a conversation about profanity and what's appropriate and not appropriate. And so I think that there would be we would have to cast quite a wide net here. And I'm not really interested in doing that. I think we have to make sure that government is involved in as limited a way as possible. And so simply saying, again, something that I believe doesn't need to be stated, but regrettably does, which is that graphic sexual material cannot be available to elementary age children, I think is an important nuance.
All right, we got time for two more. Operator, next caller.
Kelsey Arnett from CBC Calgary. Your line is open.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my call. My question's for the minister. Just picking up on something that Aaron mentioned about how having teachers be allowed to choose these books that could potentially have this sexual content and be able to teach them in classrooms, but the books aren't allowed in libraries. I'm just wondering if you could maybe clarify how this doesn't make the standards irrelevant, since being able to teach them in the classroom still means that content is available or is potentially available in schools.
Yeah, the whole nature, of course, of the ministerial order is to ensure that this material is not available in school libraries. This material exists on the internet. It exists in public libraries. It exists in many different areas. However, my primary concern is with what's available in school libraries. And so that's why the ministerial order is drafted the way that it's drafted. A teacher has the complete authority and autonomy to use material that they deem appropriate and using their professional judgment for novel studies or other exercises, and so they have that freedom and discretion. The ministerial order, again, relates specifically to library material.
Follow up?
No follow-up, thank you.
All right, operator, next caller.
Jamie Sarkonik from National Post. Your line is open.
Hi there. This is a question for Nicole. I'm just wondering, how much work is this adding to you? Are a lot of these things, a lot of these new requirements, just things that you do already, and what here is new for you?
Thank you so very much for that question. And I think that that question was already asked, but I will answer it again. I think that the majority of staff in our schools and teachers are very aware of the library materials and books that they have access to, as well in libraries that they are categorized and cataloged for when students take out a book from any library, you know what titles are not there and who has it out. So with regards to extra work, yes, this will be some extra work, but it shouldn't be extensive for our staff ultimately to remove graphic, explicit sexual content from our school libraries.
Follow up?
So your plan specifically for, I guess, enforcing this, is it to look at certain categories of books and then go through books one by one, or is it going to be maybe more passive and just wait for parents to submit concerns? I just want to get an idea of practically what this is going to look like.
I think as the ministerial order states and as the minister has advised, the main reason that this has come to light is to remove graphic, sexual, explicit content out of school libraries. There are several books that have already been named. There is several other books that are on a ban list that depict sexual graphic content that should not be available to minor youth students.
All right, that's all the time we have today. Thank you very much, folks.